Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very happy and proud, just like everyone else, to be able to stand here today and speak in support of Motion 27. And I first want to thank the Minister Minister of Education for sharing his wisdom and his thoughts on this motion, and for the most part supporting the principle of the motion. But you know, he talked a lot about the school bus safety and the lists of different school bus safety proponents and what we all need to look for. And he talked about reasons why it would be difficult to support this and to put the cameras on the buses and get that legislation changed that would force drivers that go through the lights to prove that it wasn't them that was driving the vehicle. He failed to talk about why it should be done right now or why we should be moving in that direction. He only talked about reasons why it can't happen. And when you talk about the reasons why it can happen, it's unfortunate. But Mr. Speaker, the majority of the members on this side of the legislature have a lot of respect for the Minister of Education, so we'll go easy on him, and we'll debate the reasons why we think it's important to move into the direction of you know, changing and urging the government to change a couple pieces of legislation so we can finally, and it's not going to happen overnight, Mr. Speaker, but get to that place where we can have drivers of vehicles summons to court. I believe it's called a notice to appear, appearance notice, I guess it would be. And the Minister of Family Services would know these terms better than I would, as he's a former police officer here in the city. He also would know that what that term means, and that is how you force the driver of a vehicle to prove that it wasn't him driving that registered vehicle. He has to, or she has to, prove that in court, I guess. Yeah. Right, and if they don't appear, a warrant goes out for their arrest. So they will appear, and this will only happen, these infractions will only happen a few times, and the word will get out very quickly, and the amount of infractions will decrease. There's no question about it. Decrease quite substantially. So it sounds simple, and a lot of people out there think, why isn't it happening now? Why do we have to wait? Well, it's not that simple, really, Mr. Speaker, but it can be done. And I urge the members on the government side to go further with this. And I know the minister has amended one of the be it therefore resolved clauses, but it really, you know, the amendment of that clause really doesn't address the issue, and it doesn't force us as a legislature to take the value of a life of a student seriously. Because we all know, and most of us here are parents, not all of us, but most of us here are parents or grandparents. We've got nieces and nephews. We all know that you cannot put a value on a life of a child. You cannot weigh the pros and the cons of why this is good or not such an easy idea. Other provinces in our country, Mr. Speaker, have done this. And they've done it with a fairly moderated cost. The monies that it takes to put these cameras on the school buses to purchase them can be collected back in the revenue from the fines. And those fines can be shared in a cost agreement with different municipalities, with safety organizations, with the government itself if they so wish, and with the companies that install these cameras. So the money side of it isn't the problem. It's the legislation side of it that's the problem. and the willingness to push this forward and make this happen, Mr. Speaker. And quite frankly, we all know that there are a lot of projects going on in the different departments, different priority lists in each department. So not everything rises to the top, Mr. Speaker. Not everything makes it to the top because there are a number of initiatives, and I see the minister's going to speak, and he'll talk about that. He's a man in this legislature that a lot of us have a lot of respect for, and he's probably going to speak a lot more eloquently than the Minister of Education, because this would be more of his file of the public safety coming up. The Minister of Education did a pretty good job, but he really circled around the issue, and as much as I like the man and respect him, we have the mutual respect. When you start reading in your debate a list of safety things to watch for, I mean, we're talking about children getting possibly ran over on the street by drivers that aren't paying attention. And when you start talking about asking permission or asking somebody to get something from under the school bus, if you drop it, way off topic, Mr. Speaker. But like I said earlier, we like the man, so we're going to cut him a little slack on that, I think. Mr. Speaker, it is estimated in North America alone that 15 million drivers daily ignore the flashing lights on a school bus. In North America, 15 million drivers. That's a lot of drivers, Mr. Speaker. The number shows also that there are only, and I say only because compared to 15 million drivers going through the lights, there are only 550,000 school buses on the roads in North America as a whole. So that's quite a ratio. That means we have many repeat offenders, it seems, passing through the lights on flashing stoplights on our school buses. So, Mr. Speaker, with moving this forward and installing these cameras and making the photographs or videos admissible in court, forcing the drivers that own these vehicles that have their license plates photographed, forcing them to clear their name or to prove their innocence that they weren't driving that vehicle, it wouldn't bring these numbers to zero that I just described, but it would significantly reduce those numbers and significantly reduce the chance that a disaster could happen in one of our communities, Mr. Speaker. Because, and we all know, because we all receive the phone calls, we all receive the emails, and every one of us in here on a daily basis, or maybe every 2 days, we wake up in the morning early, we're checking our Facebook messages, or we're checking Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and it's in our news feeds. Somebody we know experiencing a near-miss tragic situation in one of our communities, Mr. Speaker. And I've spoken to a number of parents in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. I've spoken to a lot of school bus drivers, Mr. Speaker, because I consider all of these people my friends. And I would hate to be one of those school bus drivers, Mr. Speaker, that has to witness that. I would not want to be one of those parents waving to my son or daughter as they walked across the street to get on that school bus, Mr. Speaker, and be run down by a car from somebody that wasn't paying attention. I could not bear that, Mr. Speaker. I would not want to be one of those school bus drivers that has to call a parent that he or she knows and tell them what happened, that they saw that for their own lives, because they would never get over that, Mr. Speaker, ever. Their lives would be changed forever. So we have the ability in this legislature, we have the opportunity as a group to really strengthen and not amend this motion that the member from Fredericton York put forward. We have the opportunity to champion this, Mr. Speaker, as a group, as colleagues of all political parties. We have the ability to prevent a death and a tragedy in our communities, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we're here for. to strengthen our laws, to strengthen our communities, to strengthen the people that live within them. Because if that's not what our purpose is, Mr. Speaker, then why are we here? Why are we here? What's our purpose? And we can't do everything for everybody, but this seems like something that the ministers responsible with everybody's support can work towards. And I'll be seriously interested in hearing more about what the government is prepared to do or planning to do, or the work that they have already done to move us closer. So this motion here today on a Thursday, on Opposition Day, is really a motion to urge the government to move, to get going, to start dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And perhaps the minister will enlighten us on some more of the technical needs as far as what needs to be changed in the Motor Vehicle Act and different acts within his department. Mr. Speaker, in 2011, the government of Prince Edward Island finally brought this legislation forward in their province. Now, Mr. Speaker, they're a lot smaller province than we are, I understand that. But at that time, the Minister of DTI and PEI, because the Motor Vehicle Act falls under him, he set aside $50,000 for about 40 cameras to get started. Now that's a phased-in approach that we could do here as well as we move forward, because we know it takes time. And maybe as we order new buses, we have them installed as we replenish our fleet. But the longer we wait, the longer that process will start. And I'm going to quote the Minister of DTI in Prince Edward Island. He said, "It's not necessarily how many people we can nab. I think once we send a few $1,000 fines out, people know. And it's going to act like a photo radar. The message will be out there that make people think before they pass a school bus." And basically he's right, Mr. Speaker. He's right. Because once those 2 or 3 fines go, or a half a dozen or a dozen, let's say, it will resonate. It will resonate with the citizens of New Brunswick and simply be a reminder for them. Because I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, that most people intentionally drive through red lights on the school bus. I believe that most people that do it just aren't paying attention to the road. But Mr. Speaker, when we, each and every one of us, have the privilege of passing a driving test and having that card in our pockets, we are privileged with protecting the lives and watching out for the lives of all other New Brunswickers on the road. Doesn't matter if they're other drivers, pedestrians, or children crossing the street to get on a school bus. We have that privilege. So if we want to create large roadblocks and a lot of paperwork for school bus drivers presently in New Brunswick, have to fill out a form, pretty well have to give away their right arm or leg or their firstborn, to make this form stick when it's passed off to the RCMP, because a driver could simply say, "That wasn't me driving, you got the wrong person." So the proof right now is on the school bus driver and the school district and the RCMP to prove that somebody was driving that car. When in fact, Mr. Speaker, that car passed that school bus, and it should be the responsibility of the owner, who that car is registered to prove that that person, he or she, wasn't driving their own vehicle. Now, I don't mean to drag this into such a debate that I make it confusing to understand, Mr. Speaker, because for me this makes totally good sense. And I want to thank in advance the minister who's going to get up and speak next, because I have a great deal of respect for him. I want to thank the previous speakers, even though some of them didn't stay on track and they got off a little bit. But for everybody here that took the time to sit patiently and seriously listen to what I said, thank you very much, and let's protect our students who are on the sides of the streets in New Brunswick waiting for their school buses.